welcome to Reflections with Pastor Ellen. And that's me. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And it is my great joy to welcome you to this time together. It's been a rough weekend for many folks. I know on Friday, after hearing the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, I just felt extremely breathless. It was hard to breathe. The weight of the significance of what had happened was just weighing so heavily upon me. And so today, as we gather, let's process some from all of this from a Wesleyan perspective, knowing that first, we do need time to process. But in our processing, there is also a call to us for mercy and justice. Let's hear these words from the prophet Micah. I've adapted the Message translation. But God's already made it plain how to live, what to do. What the just one is looking for in folks it's quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. So we come. Some other interpretations or translations of that Micah 6:8 is to love justice, or to seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. So what is the foundation upon which we look at things? One of my understandings about our criminal justice system, about the court systems, about the incarceration system, is the criminal justice system is one that needs to be accessible to all, that all need to be able to partake, to benefit from the process. There needs to be an impartiality. It needs to be honest. It needs to be have integrity and fairness to all. Now, these are based on the scriptures from Deuteronomy, Exodus, and Leviticus. And Deuteronomy 16:20 says, "Justice and only justice shall you pursue." And in my heart, in my being, the results of the Rittenhouse trial feel like anything but justice has been served. On August 25th, 2020, a young man travels to Kenosha, 20 miles from his home, approximately, crosses state line, goes to a location where he knows a weapon is, gets the weapon, and then goes to the streets. The streets that have erupted in protests. And yes, portions of the protests were violent and they were causing damage. And I don't support violent protests, but I understand the rage from the oppression. I understand that not everyone was there to violently protest. There were those who were coming to remind us that not everything is well, not everything is right in our society. And there were those who Kenosha officials have shared. There were provocateurs from out of state. And Kyle Rittenhouse was a young man who came from out of state. And he came out of state. And because of his actions, he shot and killed Kenosha resident Joseph Rosenbaum, 36, and nearby Silver Lake resident Anthony Huber, and wounded Gage Grosskreutz, 26, from West Dallas. He shared in the trial that he didn't do anything wrong. I defended myself. Well, how much accountability does he need to have? Because he brought a weapon to a situation. He brought a weapon when others were not armed. Bringing a gun changes the dynamic of any situation and creates fear. So he said he was fearful. And what is his accountability with that? What happened in the acquittal on all charges is he learned he does not have to be accountable. He learned that one does not need to do the extra work of getting to know people, of building relationships, of addressing the wrongs in society, of working for reconciliation, of working for redemption, of working for renewal, of being an agent of justice, healing, and hope. He learned that he can bring a gun to a situation, he can change the dynamic, and he can commit violence and be absolved of any responsibility or accountability. Bishop Reuben Job said Wesley had rules for living, and he simplified it. And he said the first is do no harm. The second is do good. The third is stay in love with God. Now, Wesley also did add to flee the wrath that is to come. But if our first responsibility and the foundation of all that we do is first built on love, it is built on loving God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving our neighbor as ourselves. And then the first do no harm is we don't bring weapons to situations. We bring openness, a willing to dialogue, of which Kyle didn't bring any. If we operate, the first rule is do no harm, then let's not bring weapons. Which leads us to, there's a lot of work needing to address the laws around gun rights. What are gun rights? And it continues to divide this country. But if you bring a gun to a situation, I have been trained in my law enforcement chaplaincy that if a gun is raised, if a gun is brought, there's an intention to use that gun or be prepared to use it. And I cried when I was trained to use the weapons because it meant I was changing the dynamic. It also meant there was already harm happening, but it meant that I also needed to be prepared to harm another. In doing good, it means to bring a willingness, it means to be a heart that will see the sacred and the holy at the core of each person. And staying in love with God reminds us that God is at our center, that God is God. We are not called to be God. We are called to be in relationship with God. We are called to be in relationship with one another. One that recognizes the sacred and holiness. one that celebrates the humanity, one that validates the humanity of one. And in addition to the accessibility, the impartiality, the honesty, the integrity, and the fairness to all, which needs to be the basis of any criminal justice system, not one that depends on how much money you have available. What are the resources? And we know money poured in for his defense, the cost of his defense. But a justice system must first and foremost be about humanization, since God's justice always works to bring reconciliation. Systems of retribution breed only violence and isolation. Systems of justice that are punitive only in nature create barriers to the vision of restorative justice, because they are tainted with explicit and implicit racial and ethnic bias. They punish children as harshly as adults, and they accommodate a two-tiered system that serves those with wealth and subjugates those without. That is from the Book of Resolutions. So a justice system needs to hold us accountable when we do things wrong, when we create harm. And in that accountability, there are consequences. But in those consequences, there is also a recognition of our humanity. There is a call for redemption. There is a call for reconciliation. There is a call for restoration. And there is a call for new life. When harm is done, we need to have systems in place where there can be healing, where there can be hope. And what happened in the Rittenhouse trial offers none of that. It opens old wounds. It doesn't invite healing. It certainly doesn't feel like justice. And we've harmed the young man who chose not to value life. He says he wants to live in anonymity. But what has he learned? And how will that guide him all of his days? Time will tell. And while we are processing the wounds, as we take the steps necessary to heal, to rest, to recover, let us examine what happened in the Rittenhouse trial and gather with those who can do the work to respond to the injustices that were lifted up, from loopholes in the laws to judicial behavior, to even the circumstances in community that start with a foundation of hate and not love. There's a lot of work to do as we seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. But the history in the United Methodist Church and Wesleyan theology and Methodist thought is that we do work for justice for all. We work for justice that is not that includes peace, that recognizes the whole person, and that works to transform communities. I give thanks for a tradition that shows me the way to process, that gives me 3 simple rules: to do no harm, to do good, and to stay in love with God. May that be evident in all my ways. And let's make that evident across communities. First, we do no harm. We recognize the sacred and the holiness at the core of each person. We do all the good that we can, whenever we can, wherever we can. And we stay in love with God so that our foundation is on the extraordinary gift of God's love, which includes grace and forgiveness and hope. Thank you for being with me this morning. I pray that you have encountered God, that you know how loved and cherished you are with every cell of your being, to know that you are not alone, that we do live in God's world and God calls us to be a part of a community. And may you find like-minded folks who want to do no harm, to do all the good they can, all in God's love. If you'd like to continue supporting the transformative ministries at Brown Deer United Methodist Church, I invite you to consider giving online. We are grateful for all of your support, and I end our time together sharing just how to do that. Blessings for your day, and I'll see you again next week as we start a brand new season of the Christian year. It's Advent. So come, let's prepare.